from today, One Decision is going to be putting out some extra episodes. We're going to be doing them on Tuesdays, and they are a bit more of a casual chat. I want to say a romp around some of the headlines that are doing the rounds in the UK and beyond too. And Sir Richard, of course, we're gonna study the inside of your brain to get the insights on some of these.
I think
So I hope you're prepared.
I'm prepared to study the inside of yours too.
Well, let's start, shall we? Because we've got a bit of an update on the Ukraine-Russia story. Now, we're all across the detail of what happened at the Pope's funeral. There was a meeting between President Trump and President Zelensky. People will have seen the pictures of that. But President Putin has now announced, well, some kind of ceasefire. But how much of a ceasefire really is this?
Well, I don't think there's any evidence at all yet that he's changed his fundamental war plans, and his aim is still the complete disarmament of Ukraine as a significant European player and its return to Russian vassal status. So I think Putin's probably showing a little bit of concern that Trump is not believing him when he says he wants a ceasefire. So you've got a presentational initiative, which frankly probably doesn't mean very much. I mean, we had one supposedly over 36 hours over Easter. And although there was a reduction in fighting in certain areas, like down in the south, along the front there, it didn't really change the price of anything, and it didn't change the outlook. So I think this is probably, if you can have a cosmetic gesture, I mean, I just wonder what's going on in Russia, whether there is actually pressure on Putin from people around him to go further. But I think I've said before on the podcast, there's no apparent evidence that his Ukraine policy has a reverse gear. He's still in a hole and digging. And it's very hard for him to go backwards, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, do you think that he has been affected by Donald Trump saying, I don't think that Putin is in the market for peace? I mean, this announced, as you say, cosmetic ceasefire, let's call it that, ceasefire in name only. It's between the 8th and the 10th of May. It covers Victory Day. Russia celebrates that on May the 9th, the end of the Second World War. I mean, there's quite a lot made recently when there was a meeting of the Americans and the Russians of this cooperation between the two sides around that particular date. Do you think this has been done with President Trump in mind?
Probably. But I think what you have to understand, I mean, having lived behind the Iron Curtain, during the Cold War, the 9th of May anniversary is huge. It's much, much bigger, much more important than anything we ever did or celebrated in the West. And it was also accompanied by these massive parades. So that it has an iconic significance in Moscow in particular. So in a way, it's not particularly surprising that he's picked the 9th of May as a special date. And it's the 80th anniversary of VE Day too, which gives it maybe that extra weight amongst the Russian population. And of course, the date's very potent in Ukraine as well because of the huge losses that the Ukrainians suffered in World War II in that period. And it's charged with history in a way in Central Europe that it isn't further to the west.
I've been really interested in the last couple of days in the shift in tone from the Ukrainian side on the issue of Crimea. And, I know that behind closed doors, when you speak to people on Whitehall, when you speak to British politicians, even though they publicly say, of course, Crimea isn't Russian, of course, it will never be Russian. The reality is for quite some time, everybody's recognized that is probably where we are going to end up. At least it will. I mean, the Americans offering to recognize it as Russian territory. Ukraine probably never will. But Vitaly Klitschko over the last couple of days has said, okay, we won't fight it. We won't recognize it, but we won't fight it. Zelensky seems to have changed his tone as well. Is that enough of a shift, do you think, to bring these two sides closer?
Well, I'm not sure it's enough of a shift for Putin. It's certainly a concession to Putin, and one, I guess, that was largely going to be inevitable. I mean, Crimea historically has been so important to the Russian elite and to the Russian identity that my view has been it was always going to revert to Russian control, because we showed very clearly in 2014 in the West that we were not prepared to go to war over Crimea. I mean, that was the invasion of Crimea. The Russians took it. No one in the West objected. So, in a way, we had our chance then, or we had our chance to take a firm stand, and we failed to do it. I think we lost the opportunity over Crimea a long time ago. I don't think that Ukraine will ever give de jure recognition to Russian ownership or possession, so it'll be de facto. So technically, as far as international law can be concerned, such that it's applicable, which it isn't, it'll still technically be part of Ukraine. In practice, it won't be. And I think Klitschko's recognised that. I think Ukraine, I would have thought the Ukrainian leadership probably realised that they're never going to get it back, or at least not in the foreseeable future. But of course, there may be some crisis in Russia at some point in the future, which is not to be ruled out. I mean, Russia is not in itself in a particularly solid or stable state, so it may revert at some point.
Yeah, people often say this about the Russian economy as well, and the instability of the Russian operation more generally. Do you think it opens up the question of Taiwan again? I mean, the suggestion is that if you allow Russia to take Crimea by force and then accept it and recognize it, that it sends a signal to other nations who might seek to do the same, that we're not going to stand in the way of that. We're not going to act if you seek to do that.
Well, of course, and it's hard, I suppose, if you're facing reality. Is the world going to go to war with China over Taiwan? I think this is a Taiwanese-China issue, and Taiwan is a very spiky porcupine and very difficult to pick up, if you see what I mean, even with gloved hands. So I'm not sure that the Chinese could very easily take it. And the People's Liberation Army is completely untried. It's never done an amphibious invasion. And if you know anything about the geography of the island or the state of the seas in the cross strait, it is a hugely difficult thing to do. I don't think the Chinese need to invade Taiwan. They just will blockade it, and they can blockade it indefinitely, and the West probably won't be able to do much about it.
And they've probably got enough on their hands anyway, trying to deal with Donald Trump's tariffs and trade deals and the potential for.
They've got a huge amount on their hands, and I think that, okay, it won't slip off the agenda. It'll still be permanently there, but it's not exactly the moment for China. And bear in mind, I mean, China, look, is a trading nation. What the hell is it going to do to its reputation as a trading nation if it takes Taiwan by force? So I think the Chinese have some restraints on them politically, which operate permanently, which would prevent them being super aggressive against Taiwan, unless there is a huge political crisis in the leadership and they want to distract China from some internal problem, and therefore Taiwan is the answer, a bit like the Argentinian invasion of the Falkland Islands.
Yeah. One of the interesting things that comes out of the question about China is the issue of trade deals. Now, we know that the UK is seeking a trade deal with the Americans. Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, was over in the States recently making the case. I've been really interested in the change of tone in Downing Street and again, among ministers over the last couple of days about the possibility of that trade deal. There's been some huge expectation management going on about now it's not a definite, now it's an if we can and if it's good for us. And the terms of that trade deal, the idea about what it will include really seem to have been slimmed down over the last couple of days, especially. I mean, we haven't heard very much from the Trump administration about how they feel about a UK trade deal, aside from this question about agriculture, which brings all three, America, the UK, and the EU, into a really difficult situation, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm not sure this is a circle that's going to be easily squared. I mean, personally, I think the Labour government have got this wrong, because they seem to still have this emotional Remainer attachment to a European agricultural model. Actually, if you do the sums in the cold light of day, there's much, much more advantage for the UK in a broad, general trade deal with the United States. There's no question. I mean, people find that very hard to admit, but certainly in terms of some of the economic analysis that I've seen from real experts, the marginal benefits of going back with the EU are very, very marginal indeed. And the bigger prize would be the US. But of course, this is where the politics come into it and displace the economics. And I fear we're going to end up trying to ride two horses and maybe not riding either particularly well or particularly advantageously.
With the American, in that American scenario, because the thinking is often counter to that, that the EU is the bigger, more accessible market for the UK, that we are more closely aligned on standards. In that situation that you describe, where America is more advantageous, does it require the UK to accept American food standards or accept American imports of meat, chicken, and other things like that?
It may do. It may do. What's happened post Brexit is that the European market hasn't shrunk in the way that people allege. And if you look at the food aspects of the market in relation to the percentage of GDP for the UK, it's tiny. It's not really that significant. It's not a big deal. It may be, or it may seem like a big deal because of the strength of the farming lobby. And therefore, there are different constituencies to try to satisfy and please. But I don't. We're going to end up in we're going to end up in a disadvantageous situation in relation to both agreements, is my opinion at the moment, because I don't think the Labour government is sufficiently clear-minded on the issue. I don't think it knows which way to turn.
Would you think it acceptable for the UK to import American agricultural products? Because one of the big questions and the concerns is that it's about the food standards and the things that they use in sort of growing, developing, bringing up their cattle and chicken that we wouldn't want here in the UK.
Well, really, I've lived in the States quite a lot.
And you're fine. So
I'm absolutely fine. And most of my American friends are absolutely fine too. So I just don't believe, this has been so exaggerated. Okay, it's just got completely out of proportion.
yeah, I mean, I suppose the farming lobby here argues that it would be a dilution of standards. And also, even if you don't agree with what the farming lobby says, if the UK does do a deal with the European Union and we do end up in a dynamic alignment situation in that we match our standards with theirs in order to import and export more freely, that will put a deal with America on food way out of the question.
I just don't think it's of sufficient importance to stop us doing a bigger deal with the United States that covers many other advantages and makes us part, of their trading bloc more intimately than we are. I mean, at the moment, we're sort of sitting between the two, but actually, Brexit hasn't damaged the economy, or particularly the food economy.
I mean, it brings us nicely to our, I suppose, the third thing that's preoccupying the UK this week, which is, there are local elections here. They won't change the price of fish more generally in Westminster, but there is a by-election which might. And a lot of people have eyes on Nigel Farage's Reform Party. Farage, of course, says he's got a close relationship with Donald Trump. It doesn't seem to have been as close in recent weeks and months. There's a question about how advantageous that is anyway for the Reform leader. But they do seem to be doing pretty well in local polling, and they've got the Conservatives worried and Labour too. Where does Reform's stance on America, on a trade deal, and on Russia leave them, do you think, more broadly?
Well, I think it stands pretty clearly towards a trade deal with the United States Reform. So I think that there is a distinction there. On Russia, I think Farage, having in the past expressed some admiration for Putin, has actually been very careful in what he's said and done. So I think that that's almost certainly past history. And I don't think he wants particularly to be associated with, let's say, the AfD in Germany's relationship with Russia. So I think he understands that he needs to have a sort of cordon sanitaire between where he sits and where some of the more right-wing European parties sit in the way that they look at. I mean, he's not going to be a Serbia or a Hungary. So I think he's been very careful. And I don't think Russia, well, of course, European and Russian issues won't figure in the council elections at all. It's all about local politics. And Reform are going to do reasonably well. But I think the most striking thing about these elections is it could be the sort of signs of a disintegration of the two-party system, so that you'll have a number of parties. I mean, the Lib Dems think they're going to do quite well in parts of the country. Reform's certainly going to take seats off Labour. The Conservatives look as though they're in a rather weak position because they're going to have votes picked off them by those two parties. Labour are definitely going to suffer, in my view. And the Greens, they're good at the local government level. And I mean, for example, I live in a road here in Cambridge where the majority of signs outside people's houses are green. And these are not people you would expect to vote Green because it's a high income area, if you see what I mean. But they've taken much, much more care over development issues in Cambridge than any other local party.
Well, one of the things that people are going to have to unpick, and certainly, as you say, it is presenting a problem for Keir Starmer and Labour, because that party is really disunited on that issue. And it may well be, as you say, that the fragmentation of politics away from the two parties. I mean, the Tories have lost, the Conservative Party have really lost the confidence, I think, of lots of voters. So we'll see, especially that by-election, how well Reform does. It's a Labour-held seat currently.
I think Reform will win it.
Do you?
I do. And I think they've got a very good chance of winning it, because I think there'll be a lot of people who just either won't want to vote Labour or will want to vote away from Labour just to object to some of the things that have happened since they came into power. And I mean, you've got to be careful about generalising from by results, because there are always occasions for people to object rather than to support, if you see what I mean. And there's a sort of negative aspect to them. But I think in the medium term, if the right in the UK wants to get back into power, I just don't think that the Conservatives got any choice but to do some sort of deal with Reform.
Well, I mean, Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the Tory party, has ruled that out, essentially ruled it out, suggested that only if there were local councillors elected in a council at that point they could work together, but not in order to be elected. But it's a very live issue. I mean, you've got other politicians, the mayor of the Tees Valley, Ben Houchen, the most senior elected Conservative politician in the country, saying you can't avoid it. You've got people like Robert Jenrick going to fundraisers. He was recorded, wasn't he? Shadow Justice Secretary, saying we're going to need some kind of coalition.
It'll happen for sure. And I mean, if Badenoch doesn't agree, she won't survive as a leader.
There you go. 2 predictions from you. Reform will win the by-election, and unless Kemi backs the Reform Pact, she's out.
Well, not quickly out, but she will be out.
No, I know.
Yeah, it'll take time, but before the next election, she'll be gone. I mean, come on, the Conservatives are ruthless.
Well, look, 2 big predictions. Our first extra bonus episode, 2 big predictions. We've got a lot to live up to next time we do one of these. So, Richard, thanks very much for today. Okay. Nice to see you.
Great, Katie. Good to see you too.
Well, that's it for us. Thank you, Sir Richard. And thank you to our listeners. We'll be back this Thursday with our regular scheduled episode. And of course, be sure to check us out on socials and subscribe to our YouTube if you want more exclusive content, such as explainers and interviews with world leaders. I'm Kate McCann. Thanks very much for listening.